The most dangerous mistake some people make is believing a quiet woman has nothing left to say. Eleanor Hayes was halfway through a glass of sparkling water when she heard a voice she hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. Well, this is depressing. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Michael Hayes had always entered rooms like they belonged to him. Loud enough to be noticed. Confident enough to assume everyone wanted the show. She slowly lifted her eyes. Same tailored suit. Same expensive watch. Same smile that looked charming from across a room and cruel from 3 feet away. Standing beside him was a younger brunette in a fitted cream blazer, the kind of woman who looked like she'd spent an hour preparing to seem effortless. Michael let out a short laugh and glanced around the restaurant, as if inviting strangers into a private joke. Eleanor. Alone. He tilted his head. That somehow feels exactly right. A few nearby diners looked over, then quickly looked back at their meals. Manhattan restaurants trained people to mind their business. Usually. Eleanor set her glass down carefully. Good evening, Michael. He laughed again. Still polite. That's new. Without asking, he pulled out the empty chair across from her and sat down. His date remained standing for a second, uncertain, before taking the chair beside him. Eleanor noticed the hesitation. Interesting. We're actually in the middle of dinner, Michael said, gesturing to the woman beside him. Vanessa, this is my ex-wife. Eleanor, Vanessa. Vanessa gave a tight smile. Nice to meet you. Eleanor nodded once. You too. Michael leaned back. I have to say, I'm impressed. This place isn't exactly budget-friendly. Eleanor said nothing. He smiled wider. I mean, unless someone else is paying. Vanessa let out a small laugh that sounded more automatic than genuine. Eleanor picked up her glass again. Still doing that, Michael said. That calm little act. He glanced toward the room. You always thought silence made you look mysterious. Mostly it just made conversations awkward. Eleanor took a measured sip. Across the room, one of the waiters had noticed the interaction. He paused near the service station, watching. Michael followed Eleanor's gaze, then smirked. What? Hoping staff rescues you. Eleanor looked back at him. No good, he said. Because I'd hate to interrupt whatever fantasy this is. He leaned forward. Tell me something honestly. Is this some kind of post-divorce reinvention thing? Fancy restaurant, serious expression, pretending life turned out great? Vanessa shifted in her seat. Michael. What? He said lightly. We're talking. Eleanor glanced at her phone screen for less than a second, then set it face down on the table. Michael noticed. Expecting someone? Maybe. He chuckled. Please don't tell me you finally started dating. Eleanor met his eyes. Would that bother you? He laughed too quickly. Not remotely. That answer told her everything. A server approached their table with visible caution. Ms. Ha. He stopped himself instantly, straightened, and changed course. Can I refresh anyone's drinks? Michael barely looked at him. No. The server nodded and left, but not before giving Eleanor a brief glance that Michael completely missed. Michael folded his hands dramatically. So what is this? Closure? Coincidence? Because if this is fate, fate needs better timing. Eleanor tilted her head slightly. You've always liked performing in public. His smile sharpened. Only when the audience deserves it. Now more people were noticing. Not staring exactly. Just sensing the strange gravity that forms when tension enters a quiet room. Michael lowered his voice, which somehow made him feel even louder. You know what's funny? For years, you acted like leaving me was some brave decision. But looking at you now. He glanced around the restaurant. I'm not seeing the upgrade. Vanessa stopped smiling entirely. Eleanor remained perfectly still. That seemed to irritate him more than any response could have. Say something, he said. Defend yourself. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, then gave the faintest smile. Why? Michael frowned. Because I'm talking to you. No, she said softly. You're talking for yourself. For the first time, his expression flickered. Just slightly. Then he laughed again, louder than before. Still think you're the smartest person in the room. Eleanor's gaze shifted past him, toward the restaurant entrance. Her voice stayed calm. Not the smartest. Michael followed her eyes, but saw nothing unusual. Then what? Eleanor folded her hands on the table. The most patient. Michael gave a short, disbelieving laugh, but it landed differently this time. Thinner somehow, as though even he could hear the strain in it. Patient, he repeated. That is what we are going with. Eleanor did not answer. Vanessa looked between them, her posture no longer relaxed. The restaurant had returned to its soft hum. but only on the surface. Eleanor could feel attention drifting back toward their table in small, invisible currents. Michael leaned back in his chair and crossed one leg over the other. "You know," he said, "this is exactly what used to drive me crazy. That expression, like you are above everything." Eleanor lifted her glass. "And yet you keep choosing this table." Vanessa cleared her throat softly. "Michael, maybe we should get back to our reservation." "We are at our reservation," he said without looking at her. "This will just take a minute." Eleanor noticed the change immediately. Earlier, Michael wanted an audience. Now he wanted control. That distinction mattered. "So," Michael said, clasping his hands together, "tell us what you have been doing." He smiled with deliberate politeness. "I am genuinely curious." Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "Are you?" "Absolutely. That would be new." Vanessa looked down at the menu, even though no one was ordering. Michael laughed again, though Vanessa did not join him this time. "Still sharp. I will give you that." He scanned Eleanor's face. "Although you look different." "People do, eventually." "No," he said. "I mean softer around the edges." "Tired, maybe." He shrugged. "Life can be expensive." Eleanor let the comment pass. Michael mistook silence for invitation. He always had. "I remember telling you," he continued, "that independence sounds glamorous until the bills arrive." He glanced at Vanessa. "Some people learn that lesson the hard way." Vanessa gave a restrained smile that looked increasingly uncomfortable. Eleanor studied her for a second. She seemed intelligent, alert, not cruel, just trapped in a social situation she had not expected. "Interesting." Michael leaned in. "Do you still live in that apartment downtown?" Eleanor did not answer immediately. "No, too expensive?" "No, too many memories?" Eleanor set down her glass. "Do you always ask questions when you do not care about the answers?" Michael smiled. "You always thought you could read me. I never had to guess much." His jaw tightened for half a second before he recovered. "Vanessa works in brand consulting," he said abruptly. "Very successful. Very driven." Vanessa looked surprised at being pulled into the conversation. "I mostly help companies reposition their public image." Michael nodded proudly. "She understands presentation, reinvention, optics." He looked directly at Eleanor. "Things you never appreciated." Eleanor almost smiled. "Presentation was always important to you." "It is important to everyone." "Not equally." A server passed by, slowed, then kept moving. Michael noticed that this time. "Why do staff keep looking over here?" he asked. Eleanor glanced toward the dining room. "Perhaps because you are louder than you think." "Please," he said. "This is Manhattan. No one cares." Eleanor looked at him steadily. "That is where you are wrong." Vanessa shifted in her chair again. "Michael, maybe we should just—" "Vanessa," he said, softer this time. "It is fine." The softness was performative. Eleanor recognized that tone instantly. It was the version of Michael people trusted. Controlled. Reasonable. Charming. The version that made others question their own instincts. "Actually," Vanessa said carefully, "I think I left my phone at the hostess stand." Michael waved a hand dismissively. "You did not." She blinked. "I thought. You brought it to the table." Silence. Small. Sharp. Eleanor saw Vanessa's expression change. Just a fraction. Enough. Michael turned back. "Anyway," he said brightly, "where were we?" Eleanor folded her hands. "You were explaining my life to a stranger." "Not a stranger," Vanessa said quietly. "I am sitting right here." Michael gave a quick smile. "Exactly." Eleanor checked her watch. A subtle movement, but deliberate. Michael caught it immediately. "You are very aware of the time." "Yes." "Waiting for someone important?" Eleanor met his gaze. "Potentially." He laughed. "This I have to hear." "You do not have to hear anything." "Come on," he said. "A mysterious meeting at a place like this?" He looked around theatrically. "Should I be impressed?" Eleanor said nothing. That silence bothered him more with every passing minute. Michael leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know what I think?" Eleanor remained still. "I think you came here hoping to be seen." Vanessa looked uncomfortable enough now that she stared directly into her water glass. "Michael, I think," he continued, "that after everything, you wanted to prove something. To me. To yourself." Eleanor's expression did not change. "And what would that be?" "That leaving was worth it." He smiled. "Was it?" The question lingered longer than he expected. Eleanor looked at him with an almost unreadable calm. "Yes." One word. No hesitation. Michael laughed, but this time there was an edge. "Interesting." He tapped a finger against the table. Because from where I am sitting, this feels less like success and more like theater. Eleanor glanced toward the front entrance again. Still not. Yet. You have always confused confidence with accuracy, she said. Michael exhaled through his nose. There she is. Who? The woman who needed to be right. Eleanor's tone stayed even. Correction. The woman who stopped arguing with someone committed to misunderstanding her. Vanessa finally looked up. How long were you married? Eleanor answered before Michael could. 9 years. Vanessa blinked. That is a long time. It can be, Eleanor said. Michael smiled tightly. It was educational. Eleanor almost laughed at that. Instead, she watched Vanessa process the exchange in real time. Questions forming. Details connecting. Did you two stay in touch? Vanessa asked. No, Eleanor said. Not by choice, Michael added. Healthy boundaries, Eleanor corrected. That is one interpretation, he said. A man in a navy suit entered the restaurant and spoke briefly with the hostess. Eleanor noticed immediately. Michael did not. Not yet. You know, Michael said. For someone so composed, you seem remarkably interested in the door. Observation suits you. Then let me make another one. He leaned in. You still think timing can save you? Eleanor looked directly at him. No. I think timing reveals people. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means some people talk the most when they believe consequences are far away. Vanessa went completely still. Michael chuckled, but the confidence was slipping. That sounds dramatic. Eleanor's voice remained soft. Does it? The hostess glanced toward Eleanor, then quickly toward the suited man beside her. Michael followed the movement at last. Do you know him? He asked. Eleanor looked back at him. Should I? Michael studied her face, searching for something familiar, some tell, some weakness, some sign that he still understood her. He found none. For the first time that evening, Michael Hayes looked uncertain. Michael straightened in his chair, forcing a smile back into place as though uncertainty itself were something he could outdress. You are being strangely theatrical tonight, he said. Eleanor held his gaze. You would know. Vanessa glanced between them, now openly trying to understand what she had stepped into. The suited man remained near the hostess stand, speaking quietly, but he had not approached yet. That seemed to bother Michael more than he wanted to admit. So what is this? He asked. Some elaborate coincidence. Eleanor said nothing for a moment. Then she looked at Vanessa. How long have you known him? Vanessa hesitated. About 8 months. Eleanor nodded once, not surprised. Michael gave a short laugh. We are not doing interviews now. No. Eleanor asked calmly. You seem to enjoy controlling the conversation. I enjoy honesty. Eleanor almost smiled at that. That is a bold sentence. Vanessa shifted. Michael told me the divorce was difficult. Eleanor looked at her, not unkindly. I am sure he did. What is that supposed to mean? Michael asked. Eleanor leaned back for the first time all evening. It means narratives depend heavily on who tells them. Michael scoffed. Here we go. But Vanessa was listening now. Really listening. Eleanor could tell. For years, Michael said. Eleanor thought silence made her morally superior. No, Eleanor replied. I learned that explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you is exhausting. That sounds rehearsed. That sounds experienced. Michael laughed again, but Vanessa did not. Eleanor saw it clearly now. The pattern was familiar. Michael performed confidence by talking over discomfort until everyone accepted his version of reality. It had worked for years. At charity dinners, work events, holiday gatherings. Anywhere charm could outrun truth. Eleanor remembered one evening in particular, years ago, at a rooftop event in Tribeca. Michael had introduced her to investors as the quiet one who keeps me organized, and everyone laughed because it sounded affectionate. On the drive home, when she told him she disliked being reduced to a punchline, he had smiled and said she was too sensitive. Later, when she stopped mentioning those moments entirely, he called her emotionally distant. The rules had always changed depending on what made him look best. You are doing that thing again, Michael said, snapping her back to the present. Leaving the conversation in your head. Eleanor looked at him. It was more peaceful there. Vanessa pressed her lips together, trying not to react. Michael noticed. You do not have to look so alarmed, he said to Vanessa. Divorce tends to make people dramatic. Eleanor spoke before Vanessa could respond. No. Certain personalities make ordinary conversations exhausting. Michael's smile thinned. That is rich. Is it? You walked away. Yes. Without trying, Vanessa looked at Eleanor. Is that true? Michael answered immediately. Absolutely. Eleanor met Vanessa's eyes instead of his. No. That single word landed harder than anything louder could have. Michael exhaled sharply. Please. Eleanor kept her voice level. I tried for years. Counseling appointments you skipped. Conversations you mocked. Boundaries you treated like personal insults. Vanessa slowly turned toward Michael. Is that true? That is an extremely selective version, he said quickly. Eleanor gave a small nod. Selective accuracy is still accuracy. Michael laughed, but it sounded forced now. You always did love courtroom language. Eleanor glanced briefly toward the front. The suited man was still waiting. Deliberately. Good. Did he tell you? Eleanor asked Vanessa gently. That he used to turn every disagreement into a performance? Michael sat forward. That is enough. Eleanor ignored him. Did he tell you that if I disagreed in private, I was difficult, and if I stayed quiet in public, I was cold? Vanessa said nothing. Michael's jaw tightened. You are being manipulative. Eleanor looked directly at him. That word has always fascinated me coming from you. The silence around the table deepened. Even nearby diners had stopped pretending not to notice. Michael looked around, suddenly aware of eyes he could no longer control. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Eleanor checked the time once more. Almost. Vanessa leaned back slightly, putting a subtle inch of distance between herself and Michael. He noticed that too. Vanessa, he said, softer now. Do not let this become something it is not. Eleanor answered quietly. That depends on what it already is. Michael looked at her sharply. What exactly are you waiting for? Eleanor folded her hands neatly on the table and held his stare without blinking. The moment you realized this conversation was never yours to control. Michael stared at Eleanor as though she had broken an unspoken rule. For most of their marriage, confrontation had followed a familiar rhythm. He pushed. She explained. He reframed. She defended. Eventually, both grew tired, but he always left believing he had won. Tonight, the pattern had collapsed, and he did not know how to rebuild it. You are being absurd, he said, forcing a laugh that no longer carried. You are sitting in a restaurant acting like some kind of strategist. Eleanor's expression remained calm. And yet you are still here. That landed harder than he expected. Vanessa glanced toward the entrance again, then back to Michael. Who is that man? She asked quietly. Michael followed her gaze, irritation rising. I do not know. Eleanor said nothing. This is unbelievable, Michael muttered. You orchestrated this? Eleanor tilted her head slightly. You walked to my table. Your table, he repeated. Listen to yourself. I am. He leaned in, voice dropping. You think because some random man in a suit walked into a restaurant, I am supposed to be impressed? Eleanor folded her hands. No. I think you are supposed to keep making assumptions. Vanessa looked at Michael. Do you actually know what is happening? Of course I do, he snapped, then softened instantly. She is trying to create drama. Eleanor almost smiled. That familiar shift. Sharpness followed by immediate image repair. Michael had always been excellent at editing himself in real time. Vanessa noticed it too. Eleanor could see the subtle recalculation behind her eyes. Drama? Eleanor asked. That is an interesting accusation from the man who interrupted a stranger's dinner. Michael sat back hard enough to make the chair shift against the floor. A few heads turned. He lowered his voice again. You are enjoying this. No. Eleanor said truthfully. I am observing it. Same thing. Not remotely. Michael laughed under his breath. Still impossible. Still predictable. Vanessa inhaled slowly. Michael, what exactly is this business meeting tonight? He turned toward her too quickly. A consulting opportunity. With who? Investors. Names. He blinked. Why does that matter? Because apparently your ex-wife knows something you do not. Eleanor remained silent. Michael pointed toward her without looking. Do not do that. Vanessa's tone sharpened. Do not do what? Let her manipulate the room. Eleanor spoke softly. The room seems capable of independent thought. Michael ignored her. Vanessa, you are overreacting. She gave a short, humorless laugh. I am sitting at dinner while your ex-wife calmly waits for something you clearly do not understand, and a suited executive keeps watching this table. I think I am reacting exactly enough. Michael looked momentarily trapped between irritation and charm. He chose charm. You are right, he said gently. This is strange. But Eleanor has always had a talent for creating ambiguity. Eleanor let that sit in the air for a second. That sentence is impressive. Michael frowned. Why? Because it translates to nothing while sounding specific. Vanessa actually smiled at that before catching herself. Michael noticed. His composure slipped further. This is ridiculous. He turned to Eleanor. Fine. Say it plainly. What is the game? Eleanor looked at him steadily. There is no game. Then what? A schedule. He laughed sharply. Now you are speaking in riddles. No, Eleanor said. I am speaking. In timing. He rubbed his jaw, frustration showing now in ways he could not fully hide. You always did this. Acting like everyone else needed to catch up to you. No, Eleanor replied. I simply stopped slowing myself down for people who refused to listen. That silence returned again. Not empty. Pressurized. The kind that made even strangers lower their voices. Michael looked around and became increasingly aware that the audience he once enjoyed now felt hostile. This is not a good look, he muttered. For who? Eleanor asked. He ignored that. Vanessa. Honestly, this is exactly why the marriage failed. Eleanor almost laughed. That is efficient. Vanessa crossed her arms. Meaning? Eleanor answered. He prefers conclusions before evidence. Michael gave a sharp exhale. Enough. Then leave, Eleanor said. The simplicity of it stunned him. He stared at her. Excuse me. You sat down uninvited. You started this conversation. You can end it any time. That is not the point. Then what is? He opened his mouth, then stopped. Because for the first time that evening, he did not have a clean answer. Vanessa noticed immediately. Michael. He shook his head. This is absurd. Eleanor checked the entrance again. The suited man had been joined by a woman in a dark tailored jacket, holding a leather portfolio. Both remained by the hostess stand, speaking quietly with staff. You keep looking over there, Michael said. Why? Eleanor looked back at him. Curiosity does not suit you. Neither does smugness. Then perhaps we are both overdressed. Vanessa gave the smallest involuntary laugh before covering it with a sip of water. Michael's head turned sharply toward her. That was the moment Eleanor saw something shift permanently. Vanessa was no longer aligned with him. Not fully. Tell me something, Vanessa said slowly. Did you know she would be here? No, did she know you would be here? Michael looked at Eleanor. Did you? Eleanor considered the question. I knew there was a possibility. A possibility? Vanessa repeated. That sounds very specific. Michael narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? Eleanor's tone remained neutral. It means not all meetings happen by accident. So this is planned. Not by you. His expression hardened. You think this is clever? No, Eleanor said. I think this is overdue. Michael leaned closer, lowering his voice almost to a whisper. Whatever performance you think you are building, it ends now. Eleanor met his stare without moving. That sounds familiar. I mean it. I know. That was always your preferred phrase when things stopped going your way. Vanessa looked between them. Did he really say things like that? Eleanor answered honestly. Frequently. Michael scoffed. This rewriting of history is unbelievable. Eleanor held his gaze. History rarely belongs to the loudest person forever. His jaw tightened visibly now. He stood halfway, then sat back down as if realizing leaving first might look like retreat. Who are those people? He demanded. Eleanor glanced toward the entrance. The woman with the portfolio was now looking directly at their table. Professionals, Eleanor said. That tells me nothing. Accurate. Michael rubbed his forehead. This is insane. Vanessa leaned back, putting another inch of space between them. Michael, who exactly are you meeting tonight? He answered too fast. A private hospitality investment group. Eleanor watched his face carefully. There it was. Confirmation. And what are you pitching? She asked. That is none of your business. Eleanor gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. That is where you may be mistaken. Michael froze. Just for a heartbeat. Then the woman with the portfolio began walking toward their table, followed by the suited man. And for the first time all evening, Michael Hayes looked not irritated, not amused, but genuinely alarmed. The woman in the dark tailored jacket stopped beside the table with the composed efficiency of someone used to entering high-stakes conversations at exactly the right moment. The man beside her offered a polite nod. Ms. Hayes, the woman said, her tone professional and warm. Our team is ready whenever you are. Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind that changes the temperature of a room. Michael stared at the woman, then at Eleanor, then back again as though repetition might rearrange reality into something more comfortable. "Ms. Hayes," he repeated. The suited man extended a hand toward Eleanor. "Good evening. Apologies for the delay. Traffic on Lexington was worse than expected." Eleanor stood gracefully and shook his hand. "No problem at all, Daniel." Michael remained seated for half a second too long, then stood abruptly, nearly knocking his chair back. Vanessa looked openly stunned. "Wait," Michael said. "What exactly is happening?" Daniel turned toward him with polite confusion. "And you are?" Michael blinked. "Michael Hayes." The woman with the portfolio checked something quickly, then looked up. "Mr. Hayes." Her expression shifted in a way so subtle most people would miss it. Eleanor did not. Recognition. Immediate and unfortunate. Michael noticed too. "Yes," he said quickly, recovering some confidence. "I am the one scheduled to discuss the hospitality expansion proposal." Another silence. This one shorter. Sharper. Daniel looked at Eleanor, then at the woman beside him, then back at Michael. Vanessa slowly turned toward Michael as if waiting for an explanation he clearly did not have. The woman spoke carefully. "Mr. Hayes, the hospitality expansion review is indeed tonight." Michael exhaled in relief, straightening his jacket. "Right. Exactly." Then she continued. "But the final decision rests with Ms. Hayes." Michael's face emptied. Eleanor said nothing. She did not need to. Vanessa covered her mouth briefly in stunned disbelief. "No," Michael said with a short laugh. "There has to be some misunderstanding." Daniel remained composed. "There is not." Michael looked directly at Eleanor. "You are part of the investment group?" Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "Part of it, yes." "Since when?" "Long enough." Michael let out a disbelieving laugh that no one joined. "This is insane." The woman opened the portfolio. "Mr. Hayes, your proposal was under final review pending tonight's strategic discussion." Michael held up a hand. No, wait. Eleanor, what is this?" Eleanor looked at him calmly. "A meeting." "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Answer like this is normal." Eleanor considered him. "For me, it is." Vanessa stared at Michael. "You told me you were meeting anonymous investors." "I was." Daniel spoke with diplomatic precision. "Confidentiality is standard during negotiations." Michael ignored him. "You knew?" he asked Eleanor. "I knew your name appeared in a proposal package." "And you said nothing?" "You sat at my table and spent 30 minutes saying quite a lot." Vanessa looked down, then back up, seeing everything differently now. Michael ran a hand through his hair. "This is a setup." Eleanor's expression did not change. "Interesting word choice. You orchestrated this." "No, you could have told me." "At which point?" she asked evenly. "During the comments about my finances? My life? My supposed failures?" Michael opened his mouth and closed it again. Daniel and the woman remained perfectly still, professionally neutral, but Eleanor knew they were hearing every word. Nearby diners had fully stopped pretending not to listen. Michael lowered his voice. "This is personal." Eleanor matched his volume. "You made it personal." Vanessa looked at him. "Did you seriously sit here insulting the person making the decision?" Michael snapped. "I did not know." Eleanor answered before anyone else could. "That is correct. You did not know." Michael turned toward her. "Stop acting like this proves something." Eleanor's voice stayed calm. "It proves exactly what it needed to." "Which is what?" "That context changes behavior less than character does." Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Wow." Michael looked at her. "Vanessa." She shook her head. "Do not." Daniel cleared his throat gently. "Miss Hayes, we can relocate to the private room if this is not an appropriate time." Eleanor looked at Michael for a long moment. He looked suddenly smaller, not physically, but socially, emotionally, structurally. A man discovering that confidence without information is merely noise. "No," Eleanor said finally. "I believe enough has already been clarified." Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "Eleanor, be reasonable." That phrase. So familiar. Eleanor almost smiled. "Reasonable. Yes. You mean convenient. Do not do this because of our history." "I am not." "Come on." He gestured toward Daniel and the woman. "You cannot make a business decision based on a personal disagreement in a restaurant." Eleanor looked directly at him. "Correct." He exhaled, relief beginning to return. Then she continued. "Fortunately, I am making a business decision based on observation." Silence again. Vanessa actually whispered, "Oh my God." Michael stared at Eleanor. Observation. Presentation matters, does it not? She asked. You said so earlier. He swallowed. That is not fair. Interesting. You baited me. No. Eleanor said calmly. I sat alone at dinner. Daniel glanced discreetly at his watch, then back to Eleanor. Professional patience. Michael's voice tightened. This is retaliation. Eleanor shook her head slightly. No. Retaliation is emotional. This is informational. Vanessa let out a soft breath that sounded almost like disbelief mixed with admiration. Michael turned sharply. Whose side are you on? Vanessa stared at him. That is your question? He rubbed his forehead. This is unbelievable. Eleanor folded her hands. Your proposal described a leadership philosophy centered on respect, emotional intelligence, and relationship stewardship. Michael went completely still. The woman with the portfolio confirmed quietly. That language is in the executive summary. Eleanor nodded once. Helpful wording. Michael looked physically uncomfortable now. Eleanor. Tonight, she continued evenly. I observed your treatment of service staff, your instinct for public humiliation, your communication under uncertainty, your treatment of a personal guest under pressure, and your assumption that the least informed person at the table was the least important. Daniel said nothing, but even his neutral expression had shifted slightly. Vanessa looked like she wanted the floor to open beneath her. Michael lowered his voice to nearly a whisper. Please. That word surprised everyone, perhaps even him. Eleanor regarded him steadily. Please what? Do not do this here. You began here. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. He looked around at the watching diners and seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time in years, what public discomfort actually felt like. Can we talk privately? He asked. Eleanor considered that. We have been talking publicly for quite some time. Vanessa stood slowly. I think I should leave. Michael turned quickly. Vanessa, wait. She took a small step back. No. I have heard enough. You do not understand. She gave him a look Eleanor recognized instantly. The look of someone revising a narrative in real time. I understand more than I did an hour ago. Daniel stepped slightly aside to give her room. Vanessa looked at Eleanor. I am sorry. Eleanor gave a small nod. Thank you. Vanessa left without another word. Michael watched her go, then turned back to Eleanor with something dangerously close to panic beneath the surface. You are destroying this deal. Eleanor's voice stayed level. No. She paused just long enough for the silence to sharpen around them. You did that yourself. Michael stood motionless for a moment, as though the room had shifted beneath him and he had not yet found solid ground. The confidence that had carried him into Eleanor's evening had dissolved so completely that even his posture seemed unfamiliar. He looked toward the entrance where Vanessa had disappeared, then back at Eleanor, searching for some final argument that might restore the version of reality he preferred. Eleanor, he said, quieter now. This does not have to end like this. Eleanor studied him calmly. It already did. A long time ago. Daniel remained respectfully still, giving the conversation just enough space to conclude without interruption. The woman with the portfolio closed it neatly, the soft sound somehow louder than anything Michael had said all night. I made a mistake, Michael said. Eleanor tilted her head slightly. Which one? He exhaled. Come on. No, she said evenly. That is a real question. He looked around at the silent attention surrounding them and lowered his voice further. I handled this badly. Tonight? She asked. He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Eleanor nodded once. Exactly. Michael rubbed his forehead. People say things. Yes. They have bad nights. Yes. You are going to judge my entire company because of one conversation. Eleanor held his gaze. No. I am evaluating leadership based on observable behavior under unplanned pressure. That is exactly what leadership evaluation is. He swallowed. You always have an answer. No, Eleanor said. I simply learned the difference between reacting and thinking. Daniel stepped forward just slightly. Ms. Hayes, we can reschedule internal review if needed. Michael looked at him immediately. Internal review. Daniel answered professionally. The proposal will proceed through standard reassessment. Michael turned back to Eleanor. So there is still a chance. Eleanor considered him for a moment. For the proposal? Yes. That depends on whether your team can demonstrate values stronger than the ones displayed tonight. Michael nodded too quickly. Of course we can. Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. Then perhaps this evening will be educational. He stared at her. That is it. What were you expecting? He let out a humorless breath. I do not know. Anger. Revenge. Something. Eleanor almost smiled. That would have been easier for you. Maybe. But this was never about punishing you. It feels like it. That is because consequences often feel personal to people who are not used to facing them. The words landed quietly, but with complete precision. Michael looked down for the first time all evening. I did not think. Eleanor finished the sentence for him. I know. Silence settled again, but now it felt different. Lighter somehow. Finished. Eleanor reached for her coat. You once mistook my silence for weakness, she said, her voice calm and clear enough for only him to hear. The truth is, silence gave me time to build a life that no longer needed your permission. Michael said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Eleanor turned toward Daniel. Shall we? Of course, he replied. As they began walking toward the private room, Eleanor did not look back. She did not need to. Some endings do not require the last word. Only the last choice.